Rhythm of Life Community Chorus. Welcome back to my office for another week of skill sessions. Excuse me. With Prof. Ballard. This week we're not talking about music theory or music literacy. So you may be thinking, well, what the heck are we talking about then, Mike? We're talking about range extension, which was a suggestion from Pam. Shout out to Pam, thank you. If you have suggestions also, please just let me know. I would like to make this as beneficial for you as possible. But so this is a great one, I think, for particularly since many of us have not been singing a lot since March or so. So let's talk about some vocal stuff. Before we jump into range extension, I just have to say a couple things. What I do is I work with a bunch of people and then I give general kind of generic helpful feedback. But what you have to understand about the voice is that, let's say there's 4 sopranos sitting in a section, all 4 of those people need different feedback. All 4 of those people are having different moments of tension, right? So if you need more specific feedback, like if you're like, I don't know, this is kind of helping, but not really, feel free to like videotape yourself singing or something and send it to me. I'm happy to give more specific feedback. But this is mostly just gonna be general tips and also, excuse me, some exercises to help everyone. But just know that one size does not necessarily fit all. So if something's just not really clicking with you, you might need to ask me for more specific things. The other thing I was gonna say, just as a caveat, is that if you are taking voice lessons, like vocal pedagogy, the science is all there. So most of it's very objective as far as what needs to happen to create a helpful, balanced tone and everything. What's not objective is the approach. So I've worked with many voice teachers who, like, this person I respect highly and this person I respect highly, and they respect each other. But then this person will say something and this person will be like, that's completely wrong. And this person will say, well, you're completely wrong, even though they're both kind of going for the same thing. So if you take voice lessons and you're paying money to do that, go with whatever your voice teacher says, because that person's listening to you and has their approach to how to get you to sound better. This is just what I know from my experience and what I've heard work in multiple situations. But I would likely, if I was giving a voice lesson to one of you, it would all, you get what I'm saying. I'll stop talking about that. So this is about range extension, but I can't just talk about range extension because I would be skipping multiple steps, because we have to talk about just basic vocal technique in order to get there. So the first thing, because what kind of provides our energy is the breath. I think we can all agree on that. So when I say take a deep breath, I know many people, their instinct reaction is to go, and that's what we call clavicular breathing. It's not very efficient because our lungs expanded this way, not like this. And our lungs are not in our shoulders, right? Our lungs are here, safely kind of kept within our rib cage. The first way to counteract the clavicular breathing, I think, is to focus on abdominal breathing. So if you're not sure about any of this, this is probably the first step, is you say, okay, all of this needs to expand in order for me to have a well-balanced breath. So I'm being loud so that you can hear what I'm breathing. So you see how my tummy gets bigger, smaller, and actually the pelvic floor is dropping. If you're a science person and this kind of stuff helps, I'm a visual person, so actually knowing what everything does is going to make me feel more confident about what's going on. So, but in other words, your tummy just goes out and comes back in. That's abdominal breathing. That's kind of a first step. If you're trying really hard to counterbalance the clavicular breathing, then I would say that's a great place to start. If you're like, I'm really comfortable breathing there, then the next part, and this is where I always like to feel my hands wrapped around my rib cage, and it's important to have it all the way around so that you can kind of feel the back of the rib cage as well as the front of the rib cage. And then try to just breathe there. See, even when I'm focusing on that, I have to still think really hard to not go, right? So you see that expansion there. Once you get both of those comfortable, then what you try to do is you try to make the abdominal breathing happen, as well as what's called the intercostal breathing. So that just makes the entire thing open up. Now, one of the most important things I think, and you hear us say this all the time, and I'm sure I've said it, all kinds of choir directors do all the time. Hey, we need more air here. Hey, we need more air here. And sometimes I think that's a misdiagnosis, and I have done it myself. Because when you breathe in, take a deep breath. Look how fast my air expels, right? When actually, for a healthful vocal tone, what you actually need is a little bit of resistance there. And I think voice teachers are concerned about saying tightness or tension or anything, but there should be resistance with your exhale. And so the way that I think of that is like if you say shh, shh, as hard as you can, just do it. Make sure it's not coming shh, because you can feel some musculature here. If you do it incorrectly, try to feel it all down here. Go shh. Try it a couple more times. Experiment with it until it's all here. If you're not feeling it, go ahead and pause and just try it a couple more times. Or the other one, that if that's not working, that resistance from here, you can feel it kind of engage, right? Or even go, do you feel that? So that engagement is what's going to help us. And it's that balanced with the flow. So it's pressure and flow. Sometimes there's too much pressure. Sometimes there's too much flow. It's very complicated, but being aware of it is half the battle, I think. So I would always start with one of those, because even if you just do like, we've done this in choir where you say like, okay, we're going to do 4 counts, like, and then 4 counts in, 4 counts out. Sometimes you might switch it to 8 counts out, 4 counts in, whatever works for you. But I would almost always start with one of those breathing exercises where you're feeling that kind of resistance, because otherwise you'll likely be using too much air and not enough what's called subglottal pressure. And it could cause various issues. So that's first things first. That's the number one basic thing, is our breath, right? Then I think the next thing that I always like to do, again, you might have a different approach, and that's great, but then finding the space, our head space, and we've talked about this quite a bit. Woo! It's all that kind of yawny. I always like to do, and then you feel all that space back there. Another way that if that's confusing, the yawn. Kind of feel if you start yawning, that's a great thing. And then you just try to memorize where that comes from. The other thing that I always, so silly, voice exercises. The other thing that we've done in choir, sometimes it's worked, particularly for our sopranos, when trying to sing higher, is where I would say like sniff the rose, and for some reason, sometimes this flaring of the nostrils and the lifting of this helps me feel that. Another thing that sometimes people say is like, try to feel cold air on the back of your throat. But really what it is, it's a lift here. I don't know if I want to say lift. Let's just say more space. Sorry. Woo! We always talk about that, right? We always want to kind of establish that, and then maybe do some on your own, trying to keep that space up. Just keeps all this nice and loose and gets the air flowing. And then just do a couple of those on your own. If you need to pause, I'll just keep going, because this isn't a 40-minute long video. I always like to start here, so we can kind of start with the sopranos and altos. Starts you kind of in a head voice kind of place, with a nice run, ooh, feeling all that, ooh, all that hooty space. Tenors and basses, I always start you here for the sake of being consistent with sopranos and altos. You can actually start on like an F or something, so you feel, ooh, our falsetto kind of space. I think it's always nicer to start light and then bring that down into our full voice or chest voice, whatever, rather than, so excuse me, starting too low, excuse me, and then trying to bring all that chest voicey stuff up high. If you're a more experienced vocalist and you've taken quite a bit of voice lessons, you might have a different approach. For me, this is a great place to start. So let's just do this, just nice and relaxed. Ooh, lots of space in the back. Make sure we're keeping it light and keeping lots of space. Just keeping that space nice and light. We'll do 2 more. Lovely. Now, again, oh, I didn't mention this. We're still not going to start with range extension. I know that that's the goal of this video, but we always want to get some other things going. So that's a good one to keep. Ooh, and the sopranos and altos, that'll really help you, anyone really, but I think that that's generally a problem, is not having that kind of headspace when we sing those high notes. The next thing we want to do is get our resonance going. I think what happens is a lot of people, we want to get the sound a little bit more out here. Before we do that, actually, to really get it going, this everybody's favorite. Let's go. Yeah, 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 yeah. And you can have a really spread vowels. Just gross. Stick out your tongue if you want to. Just if your neighbors get upset with you because it's so ugly, it means you're probably doing right. Unless it hurts. Don't hurt yourself. Yeah, 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 yeah. Gross. Ugly. So that's what, I know it might hurt you to do that. You're like, oh God, I sound bad. But it's more about the process. So if you don't feel like your sound is really coming out here, keep doing it. And then we're gonna mess with it a little bit. Now we're gonna say, will you actually, just pretend like it's right in this space. Here we go. What I will say is that if you find yourself going, like tensing up here at all, sometimes what might be helpful is, or one that I've liked recently even more is, excuse me. So you find air expelling below the tongue. So it's like your tongue and your bottom lip are vibrating together. To me, that gets the tongue and everything nice and loose. So do this multiple times if you need to. And then go back to the. Now let's try it from here. Let's try it. Let's try it. Here we go. Two more. Thank you for excusing the very out of tune piano. So that's good. So we've got some breath going. We've got some breath support, the resistance, right? Woo, we worked on our space. If you've already lost the space, go ahead and go back to that warm up, or even just some things to remind yourself, whether it be the rose, whether it just be like that cold sensation going down here, all that stuff we want to feel. I think we're ready to jump into range. Now, what's important, I always like to do things, and if you have other warm-ups that tackle range, great. For me, the goal is to not sit on it too long, unless you're like your third or fourth range warm-up in. So sometimes I'll do this one that goes, I wouldn't start with that one just because it's like, you're sitting on that high note for so long. Always do one where you're kind of popping up to it and then coming back down. So then you can just add one note at a time, and you're not kind of adding too much tension. So the one I default to is, I love to sing. You can switch this to tomorrow or I sigh to see. Any of those are fine. If you find any that's getting tense, like I often do, you can just switch it to as we go up. Like the first one's generally not too hard. What happens as we go further up is that I notice that there's a kind of a ceiling on our space, particularly with the altos and sopranos. I love to sing, and then as we get higher, it starts like that space we have in the back kind of starts to close down. So when we get to like here, it's like I love to sing, right? We want to keep all that space, that resonating chamber, so we can get as much color up there as possible. A couple of tips for this: don't be too heavy. I think sometimes we try to muscle it up there, and then it's just really tense, and then it's going to hurt. The other thing I notice is a lot of people want to go, I love to, just a spurt of air. It really helps if you keep it legato. It might be uncomfortable at first, but that consistent airflow, you remember we were talking about the balance of pressure and flow, is going to feel much more easy than yum, beam, bum, bum, bee, right? So keeping it legato and physical movement helps. So when I'm doing this, I'm almost never sitting there going, I love to sing. Oftentimes I love to sing. Or, my favorite one that we do in choir oftentimes is, I love to sing. A nice little plie. If you are a workout person, you have like those kind of workout rubber bands. I love to sing. Or this might sound weird, but I swear I've seen this done in choral rehearsals. A pair of pantyhose. Anything you have stretchy around the house, just to feel that kind of resistance, and that's going to connect to the breath. If you're painting the fence, or another one that I really love. Sorry, but just because I'm going to throw like 10 analogies at you, and one of them might stick. I really love the ping pong paddle underwater. Pretend like you're swimming, or like you're like trying to stir a really thick vat of honey. Any of those. Try it. Experiment with all those. And the movement, all the things, the space, legato. Woo! Here. Let's just say I love to sing, or whichever words you choose. Here we go. Sorry. Now, if you just got to that last one, that's a high C. You don't need any range extension. It's the second ledger line above the treble clef staff. Those sopranos and altos, for tenors and basses, that's on the treble clef staff. So that's pretty high. If you didn't make it that high, don't worry. Don't worry. Just keep keep going back and checking all these things, because I know that there's like a billion things to think about. But if you're like, okay, did I have enough space on that one? Let's try it. Did I have enough pressure? Did I have a consistent airflow? Sometimes we say more air when we mean consistent air. Do I have little spurts of air? Do I have enough resistance? Do I need to go back? And you can always go back to the basics. If you're like, something's going wrong, this is not fun, check tension, check this tension, check all those things. I want to do one more for you, just in case you don't like that I love to sing thing. Where shall I go today? Or you could say, what are you doing today? Oh, what a beautiful day. I've heard all these. Doesn't really matter. What I will say is when we give above the staff, kind of this F sharp G area for the sopranos and altos, you're gonna want, so if you're saying, oh, what a beautiful day, I would just, oh, what a beautiful day. We don't want to overextend, like, but we also want to just drop the jaw. Yeah. Tenors and basses, it actually works the other way. We'll get more specific about that. But in other words, tenors and basses, when you get really high like that, opening the vowel more is actually counterproductive for us. It's weird. Just experiment with that. It'll feel uncomfortable. So tenors and basses, if you're going way too high, it should feel a little wrong. And what you just do is you just slightly modify. I'm still saying an but I'm not right? I can never watch these videos because I probably look so dumb. Do we do? Let's try it. Here we go. Let's do that one again. My bad. Beautiful. And we just worked our way back up to that high C. If you found this helpful, great, use it. Again, if you're like, hey, I think I get it, but I don't know, this warm up was weird for me or whatever, shoot me an email. If you want to record yourself and want some feedback, let me know. Or if you're like, hey, the upper range was very helpful, let's work on the lower range. Perhaps we'll do that in another week. Yeah, just let me know. With that, I will leave you till next week. Love you all, Rhythm of Life. 12th Ballard, signing off.